Welcome back to the Day One Podcast. I'm Adam Daly, your host, and I'm excited to be here today and talk to you, and hope you're all doing very well. I've got a special guest on the episode today, so please welcome Mike Mraz. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
I reached out, this is probably back in January when I did an episode kind of after a hiatus, and Mike was the first one to reach out to me and say, hey, I'd love to jump on the episode and talk about his use of Day One. And you actually had a really compelling story, and we're going to dive into all of that in just a bit here. But I'm excited to talk to him about his journaling habits, and I think we can all glean a lot from that just based on what he told me in his email. So we'll get all of those answers to you here in just a minute. I wanted to talk about today, we actually released version 4.11 on 4.11 on iOS. 4.11 came out on Mac a few days ago, and there's some great stuff. There's a lot of fixes in there. The team's been busy working on this, adjusting things for the new daily prompts, looking at reminders with templates, a lot of different stuff with the multi-entry view and on this day. A lot of stuff's going into this release, and it's only going to get better. Speaking of the daily prompts, I'm really excited about this feature. This was easily one of our top requests that we've received, especially recently, and they're a great way to start journaling. So every day a new journal or a new prompt will appear, and you click or tap to answer. It'll open up in a new entry with that question in the header. For me, I've seen prompts or questions that I probably wouldn't have thought about otherwise, and it's really been great to get my mind going and my memory going. On iPad and Mac, you can see the prompt in the right panel there. Just tap answer and it loads up that entry. On iPhone and iPad, you can also tap the plus button at the bottom of the timeline, and the prompts will be in there as well. If you've already answered a prompt in the plus menu, you can tap it again to view the entry or answer the prompt again, or even view recent prompts. So you can go back past 10 prompts or so and see which ones you've answered, which ones you haven't, and go in from there. So really cool feature. I think this is going to be exciting and very helpful for people who just want, an idea of what to write down. Like I said, for me, some of them have been things that I wasn't even thinking about before. Considering everything, when we first released this feature, it was right about when states were starting to make, these stay-at-home orders, and I think one of the very first prompts was, how are you affected by COVID-19? And we had a lot of great feedback about that. It was timely, it was relevant, and they were able to jot down some thoughts and record how they have been impacted, because certainly it's impacting all of us in different ways. Anyway, if you want, prompts can be disabled in the settings if you wish. In Mac, you just go to Preferences, General, and there's a box to uncheck for the prompts, and iOS, it's just in the settings to go turn it off. You can actually also set it to a specific journal if you want. So really cool stuff. I'm very excited about this. Anyway, check out those release notes. You can find them on help.dayoneapp.com. A lot of great stuff went into 4.11. So stay tuned. There's more. And guys, I want to tell you all the things, I have to learn to resist. There's some things that are happening. We're still working on those PDF improvements and the layouts, which is going to be great for book printing and PDF exports. It's going to look a lot more like what you see in the actual entries. This is a custom-built PDF export process. It's going to be awesome. We're going to be testing it here very soon, so I'm excited for that. That's pretty much all I have for updates. I'm excited to dive into this conversation with Mike today and talk about his process of journaling. Especially, Mike, this line got me when you emailed me. You said that you had been journaling since a child.
Yes.
As we get into that, tell us a little bit about your background first. Introduce yourself.
My name is Mike Mraz. I'm a podcaster myself. I'm in higher education administration, so I come from the academic world, and really enjoying I'm saying kind of sarcastically, the quarantine experience
Right.
at the moment, as I have all the family here at home. But I've been journaling since as early as I can remember. I think some of the first things I did, how you journal at different times of your life is going to change. So I started
Yeah.
as a kid, and for me, it was I consider it journaling because it was one of those old cassette tape recorders I had gotten as a gift. So I would do audio journals,
Oh,
and I would make little shows for myself and things like that. Later on in childhood, it was very therapeutic. I went through a trauma when I was younger, and it was how I dealt with it. And then the path just kept going from there, just kept growing as I did, as I matured. And in college, I really dove into it. And it's been all that way through getting married and having a family, graduate school and child, to today. And now it's purely digital through day one.
wow. That I remember doing some journaling like as a teenager, probably not as much before I was 12, I would say. Um, and then I journaled a little bit more in my early 20s and then dropped off almost completely until probably I was 30. And then I was like, you know what, I should start documenting things, for future family, for posterity, whatever. And I didn't get serious until then. So was it the trauma that may have introduced you to that, or was it something you had wanted to do before?
Uh, I think it was just something that I'd wanted to do anyway.
Yeah.
So it was just an interest, and I don't know if you call it a skill set, but as a child, it was just something I was familiar with doing. So the trauma, it was just a natural combination for that.
Nice.
I'd write everything down and be able to process feelings that way. But it was just a personal thing. That was just the journaling writer side in me coming out, not working with a counselor or anything, getting you to do some journal. It was just something I did on my own. And I think some of it just came about because I'm just a writer as well,
Nice.
a storyteller and things like that. So just writing is just kind of part of how I think. That's how I live, and it's how I process things, emotions, feelings, thoughts, which makes a lot of the journaling that I do very raw. But it's just kind of part of who I am, and so that's I include a lot of things going way back. But I consider myself a journaler from a child.
I like that. Do you still have some of those early journals and audio recordings and stuff like that?
Yes, actually I do, and I just came across them recently. I don't know if these cassette tapes are still good. I'm
Uh-huh.
hoping that they actually are. And a few weeks ago, I actually went online to try to find some of these services that will, clean up the audio. I'm afraid to get them and put them into anything myself because if
Right.
anything goes wrong, I don't know how to deal with that. And they may have been corrupted by this point. I don't know, but I'm hoping that they're not. And if I can get them to a service and capture some of those things. And now this is when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old. My son would just flip to hear me at that age. So he's hoping that it works out. So I want to get those digitized to see if I can salvage them if I
Yeah.
can. And then they're just going straight into an attachment
Awesome.
to day one to preserve. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, no, exactly. That sounds amazing because with our recent addition of document scanning and PDF attachments, instead of transcribing all my handwritten ones, now I'm just taking a picture of the pages. That way, I preserve
Yeah.
my
Mhm.
handwriting. That all gets saved, but now it's digital. It's in my day one journal now. If I wanted to later, I could print it out in a nice concise book with all my current stuff, and that's kind of what I've been doing with the document scanning recently. So I think that would be cool. I mean, now that we have audio support, if you can get those digitized, throw them in day one, you've got audio there. That would be so neat.
Absolutely. That was the audio edition was really a game changer for me. I was really waiting for that.
Yeah.
So I
So
was happy to see that.
we'll talk about those things in a minute here. So don't let me forget. I know I probably will, but you mentioned your journaling habits evolved over the years. Early on, maybe more of a performance kind of way into therapeutic stuff, and then maybe now you're saying you're documenting stuff a lot more raw. Like how were there moments in time that kind of triggered those different changes, or how did you start to define what journaling meant for you to what you're doing now?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Actually, there were moments in time, in a broad sense. When I was really young, a lot of the journaling that I did was just very playful,
Mm-hmm.
kid-like stuff. I would put on little radio shows, and then when I would do the audio version, and then when I was writing, I'd make up stories and different things. But when I look back at that, it's pretty sporadic. Sometimes it's like what I had for dinner. For some reason, it was important, or what my dog was doing that day.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a little paleontologist. You just get one little piece of the bone, and you have to imagine what the rest of the creature looked like. That's kind of how my journaling was when I was a little kid. I just get these little pieces and snippets. I didn't know any better to go into more detail.
Sure.
So, but when I get enough of them together, I can kind of get some pictures of what my childhood was like and what I was thinking at the times. So that's how that was. Trauma is obviously very therapeutic. It's sometimes difficult to go back and read those. And then when I got into, college and graduate school, those are the harder ones to read through, because then, you're maturing, right?
Yeah.
You're growing, you're developing your identity, your values, things like that. So it's a lot of just processing raw emotions and feelings and thoughts. Very formative, it's very developmental. I go back and it's kind of embarrassing to listen to, but good things have come from that.
Right.
So that was the style back then. And more recently, like if I were to describe myself right now as a journaler, it would be kind of like a scrapbooker.
Okay.
And this is coming because I have a child now. I have a
Yep.
wife,
Yep.
family. So all of a sudden, the processing thoughts and feelings just isn't high up on the list anymore. It's still there, but now it's about capturing moments, capturing pictures, things that my son does, and with the pictures, and remembering to do some audio every once in a while, do some video once in a while to put in there. And I'm using my journal more as a family scrapbook. And so even just in terms of like privacy and intimacy, before I would do a lot of private stuff that I wouldn't want anyone to hear because I'm, working through
Yep.
internal things. Now, when I approach a journal entry, I very much view it as something that someone is going to read
Yeah.
at some point. It's kind of history. It's a family history. So I tend to try to like separate those things out. But that's just, if I look at my life and just the span, that's kind of how things have flowed and what has changed them over time. I think it's kind of a beautiful thing when you look back on your life. If you've been doing this, app aside, if you've just been journaling for an entire life, we go through so many changes and fluctuations, and
Yeah.
it's really interesting to see those bigger, broader swings we take.
Yeah. 100% agree. And I feel like kind of what triggered me getting back into the podcast and after that hiatus, I did mention on that episode that my father had passed away a few months ago. And man, what a moment to take all those memories, all those feelings, and put them in there to, like you said, capture those memories so that later people can see how I went through this process and maybe
Hmm.
see as I progress, as my journal continues, how I grew from that, uh, what did I learn, or just even how I was feeling. Because I have this tendency to not wear my heart on my sleeve and Jack Donaghy and push down all my feelings, crush it with my mind vice. But as you were talking, being raw, being open, there's definite benefits to that, I think. Um, do you feel like it helped you through some of those things, being able to journal and just throw all your thoughts and feelings? Were you able to process, uh, maybe help more in a healthier way than maybe without journaling?
Oh yeah, definitely. I also have a background in counseling, and so that is something that I'm constantly aware of, just the writing process. I mean, writing is learning.
Ooh.
Um, and, learning is a very broad term. You could be learning about yourself, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, the world around you, other people, so you process it in this way when we write. And now we can, do audio and, there's different ways of doing that. But when
Yeah.
we do that, that type of reflection is just a fundamental learning process, and it changes you, it shapes you. It's kind of messy. You don't see it right away. And but when you go back, having a record of it, when you go back and you go back to those times, maybe after some time passes and you go back to the journal entries about your father, or anyone else who goes back to some difficult times, any transition time, that's when the clarity comes in. That's
Mm,
when you begin to see who you were at that moment, what you were struggling with, and where it led you. But sometimes we don't see it right away, so it's nice to capture it, and it'll make more sense later, and you can process it then.
yeah.
And like you were saying, you don't wear your heart on the sleeve, and I think most of us do that. We kind of project who we want people to see of us. But it's nice to know that the truth of who we are and what we're going through is there, and at some point someone's going to know it, and they'll be able to identify with it and understand what you went through.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of been my motivation for all of that. And certainly, most of us can relate to the difficulty that we're all facing right now. And
Hmm.
maybe some of our listeners out there are experiencing loss of loved ones because of the freaking pandemic that's going on right now. And it's been interesting. I run the social media pages, well, at least for Twitter and Facebook. Our good friend Juice does the Instagram stuff. But it's been interesting watching people post, especially on Twitter, how important journaling is right now. And so we've had a bump up in downloads because people are wanting to document what's going on right now, and I think that's so important. I think as much as my anxiety takes over sometimes during this whole thing, getting it out on that paper helps me kind of release stress. It's like punching the pillow, I guess.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's a form of connection. Whenever we go through anything that's difficult, whether it's happy or sad, we reach out to each other. We go back to our connections. Whether it's gathering together for a birthday or gathering together for a funeral, when we connect with other people is when we have a sense of meaning and comfort.
Mm.
And sometimes we can't have that. Sometimes those other people aren't there. But writing down, into a journal or doing an audio entry kind of simulates that in a sense. We're talking to ourselves, but we have that feeling of connection. We have that benefit of, talking to someone else and just hearing our thoughts back and being able to process it. And, it works. I mean, it's one of the fundamental benefits of journaling. Just for me, it's very therapeutic.
For
And
sure.
especially right now, like you were saying, with the coronavirus and all of us, being quarantined, I part of my journals is just kind of like a little daily update. But
Yeah.
sometimes I just dump on all the frustrations and things. And sometimes when it comes to that, I can't write. It's too difficult to type. Typing is great for certain things, but sometimes when something's more emotional, I'll just flip on the audio feature of
Yeah.
the app and I just talk and I just vent it out and I just let it out. And then I get turn it off. It's captured, it's done. I feel better and I get back to daily life, what needs to be done next and
Yeah.
to get through. It's helpful.
I thank you. I think it's going to be interesting, what happens over the next few months or years. And hopefully people have a chance to be honest with themselves, write down their feelings, write down what's going on. I saw this really cool shortcut on the Day One Facebook community page where someone has built in this thing where it'll capture the front page of the New York Times in a PDF and throw it in a journal entry. So you just run that shortcut and boom, an entry is created with the front page of the New York Times. A pretty cool way to document what's going
Mm-hmm.
on each day, just to see the progress of everything and what happened. I mean, can you imagine if we had journaling tools like this in 1918 or other world pandemic problems? What would they have said, and how could we learn from that? So maybe that's what's important right now, and we learn from what's going on, we write it down, and then in the future hopefully people make even better decisions. I guess that's what I'm hoping for.
That's all we can do. Just, shoot for the stars and just, get as much as we can out of it. It
So
all works out.
I yeah. So tell what would you recommend to someone who maybe doesn't have a knack for journaling right off the bat, or started as early as you did? What if I'm an adult now, I've never really journaled before? What kind of suggestions would you give to me to help me build up that habit? Because I get that question occasionally, and I'll recommend reminders or stuff like that. But getting into that mental habit obviously takes time. Are there any recommendations you would offer?
Well, I guess it's going to depend on the person, right?
Sure.
And your own individual needs. So the answer to that is going to depend. Um, but if I just answered you in a most generic sense, I would say probably the one common denominator that we all have, regardless of whether we journal or not, is social media.
Yeah.
We're all used to putting a picture online or putting a quick, you know, thought down and just throwing it out there into the void. And that those type of social media habits are perfect starting place for journaling, especially in day one, because it really simulates a social media experience. I've noticed my journaling starting to change. It's a little bit quicker, it's
Oh,
shorter, just kind of capturing things. It's kind of like Facebook, like Twitter, like Instagram. It really is all those things. So for someone that's just starting out, I'd say, treat it like a social media platform.
okay.
If you have to convince yourself, test it out, put it on day one and everything. When you're ready, then post it. You have like a little day one becomes a little holding pattern for your posts and things that you're going to do. So that's one generic way of looking at it. Another way is what I did with my son who's 16. And he's not a journaler at all. It's just kind of your typical teenager and just kind of in the moment and active and everything, and not always very reflective, at least not in the same ways, as his dad.
Sure.
Um, but I got him a subscription for day one to be able to give it a try. And one of the things that made the difference for me finally to be able to do that was the audio feature.
Mm.
And for him, he's really not going to sit down and type out anything really long and lengthy, but he will press the record button and just talk and just just dump out things about his friends, what's going on, the little drama. Doesn't have to share it with me.
Sure.
Doesn't have to share it with his mom or anything. Just reminding him that it's a private experience, and just kind of collect your thoughts a little bit and just dump stuff out. You may actually enjoy coming back to that a little bit later in life. So that was an entry point for him to get started. So, when you're working with people or you're trying to get them to start journaling, it's gotta kind of take them where they are, just see what they do already, and what they might get out of it, and what might be the path of least resistance for them.
Yeah.
So there's a couple ideas.
No, I love that. And that's kind of what I've tried to be a proponent of is you have to define journaling for yourself so that you have that connection and that desire to keep going with it. Because if I have to sit down every night and write out 4 or 5 paragraphs, that's going to become boring and tedious, and I'm going to start letting it slide. But I think to a degree I do similar things. Most of my journals are pictures. That's my starting point. I'll take pictures throughout the day and then throw them in my entry to kind of remember what happened. And lately it's been my kids have been doing this. So at their school they would have a spirit day every Wednesday where they would dress up or do something, silly hats or whatever. So now that we're all home, my daughter has been doing spirit days with the family, and so
Mm-hmm.
every Wednesday we do a new thing. And yesterday was fancy day. So I was in a tuxedo and the kids were dressed up, and we just had a fancy day. And we took a picture of that, and that, goes in my journal, and it's just 1 or 2 lines about what we did. And that's it, right? It doesn't have to be this compulsory paragraph, book long thing or whatever to write down. And I feel like sometimes we let that mental roadblock get in our way when it could be as simple as pretend it's like Facebook. And I've seen that comment on Twitter a lot where they use day one as a staging platform, right? If you've got something to say, write it down there. And if you still feel good about it a little bit later, then post it, I guess those are people who are occasionally posting more controversial things, but what a good place to start,
Yeah, sometimes journaling a social media like post is a good filter to get rid of the confrontational things. There's that happens when you don't when you're your own audience.
Yep.
So there's a side benefit to that. But yeah, I completely agree. I'll do snapshots of stuff. I'll just capture the moments, and it's probably a challenge for some of us old timers journalers.
Hmm.
Where letting go of that, like how many paragraphs or pages did I do, that's really what a journal is. That's a diary.
Yeah.
Letting go of that and just being content with just the snapshot of life, in whatever format that is, like social media. Because, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, you go a long period of time, and I tend to kind of go back and backtrack a little bit to try to fill in some days before I forget.
Sure. Yep.
But man, it would make all the difference if I just took 30 seconds that day and just wrote down 2 sentences just to trigger a memory of what was there. And now I'm trying to remember. And, so sometimes the shorter things, you'll be glad you had them. So just do them if you don't have the time for anything more.
Well, now I'm in this competition with myself with the streaks. I don't know if that affects you at all, but man, I love seeing that little fireball next to my streak number.
I have actually stayed away from that.
Okay, okay,
That
okay.
is that is uh, I know myself and
Yeah.
I know the competitiveness. Like I'm the guy that had to complete my rings on my iPhone for a full year, and
Yes.
it's like, okay, I need to stop. So when like New Year came, it's like, okay, I did it a year, and I intentionally need to miss a day so I can break this,
Yeah.
addiction to completing it. I think that is such a great little feature to have on there. I do pay attention to it, but yeah, I do know myself a little bit. I don't have any problem getting through and journaling stuff, so
Okay.
I do pay attention, but I try not to depend on it too much because it'll drive me crazy.
That's
That's
fair.
just a personal thing.
That's totally fair. I completely understand. And as this was rolling out, I know we definitely had some feedback. We're not we're trying to make it a positive thing, obviously. So
You guys do a great job because as long as all these tools and features are there that we could use it the way that we want,
yeah,
that's perfect.
yeah. And I'm excited for what's to come. This year, I can't announce it all right now, but I'm definitely going to as much as I can in advance. But I'm excited for this year. It's going to be a great year. You know, thankfully we have the opportunity to work remotely since it's all on computers. Um, and I just say I know not everybody has that opportunity, and I just want to express my thanks out there in the podcast world, or those who are listening, to those essential workers that are putting themselves out there with all of this going on. I cannot express my gratitude enough. Um, Sorry for that aside, but let me ask you this: do you still keep like a more private journal in addition to the more scrapbooky one?
I don't do anything separate,
Okay.
but I label them differently now.
Okay.
So, and I use the multiple journal feature for that just to be able to separate them out a little bit. So yeah, so now it's more just I kind of like tag what type of journal entry is this,
Okay.
and so I separate it that way. So yeah, I do dive into the just some of the deeper raw thoughts that are I just don't want to be publicized, but I just need to work through,
Yep.
and I still use it for that too.
Yeah. Day one's asking for my password here. Okay. I was gonna ask this because I feel like for me it's been really helpful, especially with the on this day and being able to go back and reflect. Uh, with you having a lot more data of even available, do you feel like it's helped your memory stay fresh and active? Like you feel like you can remember things pretty well?
Absolutely, 1000%. I remember things that my wife has no recollection
Hmm.
doing whatsoever. I remember details that yeah, that I wouldn't. I mean, even after some time, I've since forgotten them, but the on this day feature brings them back.
Yeah.
And then, so then after a while, they just kind of stick in your memory, and I just remember so much more about life and everything. And I probably annoy my family at the family dinner. It's like, did you know that on this day 5 years ago, so and so had his first grape, or something like that? There's like really weird things that I put in there, but I'm so glad these like really weird details are just great. Like I know the day that my son saw Star Wars for the first time. I know what his the first thing he ever ate was, or the flavor he ever tasted was a grape. And these are just little things that I wrote down, and now they come back to me day after day, and it's really awesome, and it absolutely helps my memory.
Awesome. So and I love that aspect. I've been working with my own mom to get her on there and make sure that that's something active because as we get older, that starts to deteriorate. But if you're making those connections regularly, I mean, you probably have a better background in talking about this than I do, but making those connections regularly help them stay fresh, right? And they don't recede back to deep memory as quickly, I guess.
Right, exactly. It's just the act of recalling them is what grounds them,
Yeah.
and on this day does it, and journaling itself does it.
Awesome. As we wrap up here, let me ask you this: why day one? How did you stumble upon day one? What drew you to it? Did you try others? I mean, I'm not here to compare everybody else, but just curious how you got into the day one game.
No, actually, I have no memory of how I came across it. It probably was just random. It was just I saw it someplace, maybe on a podcast or
Mm,
something, and um, or maybe a twit if it was featuring something, something like that. But I hadn't used anything before. I had gone digital. I was just using a word processor,
Yep.
and I'd just gone digital for quite some time. And then I just stumbled upon the Day One app and I decided to use it. And I think this was back in, I think I started in 2013.
Yep.
So I've been using it for a while. It's been sporadic through the years, but it has been consistent. Um, and that's how I stumbled into it. And this was my first app doing this. And and at first I was a little iffy. Well, I'm basically just doing the same thing as I am in a word processor. But then I started diving into some of the features. I was like, no, this is a little bit different. This is simpler.
Yeah.
This gives me the ability to catch more, life memories and little things. And then as you started adding features, I was just hooked. This wasn't just an app anymore. This was like a community. This is
Yeah.
a new journaling experience that is keeping pace with where we are in today's world and with technology. And I've just been there since. And now I've been going back and I've been doing this massive consolidation project, and it's pretty big. So I just take in little pieces, but I've been going back to my old printed journals,
Oh, wow.
to old photos, and putting everything into Day One. Now I keep those old things,
Sure.
they're
Sure.
still there, but I just wanted to start to consolidate so that I could, flesh it out. Which is why when I was thinking about when I started Day One, I had a hard time because usually you just go to your first post, right?
Right.
And you see when it was. Mine
Now
is
you have
buried in
backdated
there
stuff.
because
Yeah.
I all my digital stuff, it was just a matter of copying and pasting and then just dating it appropriately. And I've just begun to flesh everything out in Day One. And I couldn't be happier. It's
See,
been great. It's changed the way I journal.
yeah, and I can imagine as you're putting in those older things. So I did something similar. I didn't have as much going as far back yet, and I still have some paper journals to scan in. But I love going back to those entries I made in 2008 on a word processor and exported to a plain text and then imported into Day One. And so now when On This Day pops up on those times that I journaled, I have those memories in there. I don't have to go to the word processor and go through all the pages or whatever. It's all right there for me, and that's my favorite feature. But let me ask you. I asked you at this at the beginning. You said just one. You're more than welcome to say more than that if you'd like. But what would be the top for you?
Oh, yeah. I was gonna go like the cheesy route of just saying the, ease of use, which is all encompassing. And even though that's true. But yeah, I mean, obviously just talking with me, just, this short amount of time, you can see that I'm kind of an ecosystem person. I like this whole space and all the features. But if I were to pick one, I think it would probably be the addition of audio.
Okay.
And I think I mentioned that as we were talking a little bit earlier, that was really a game changer for me because it opened up me sharing things that I wouldn't normally take the time to type.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, that really expanded what I'm putting in my journal now, both in trivial ways, but also in really in-depth ways. Because sometimes just as a parent and, with kids, and we just don't have the luxury sometimes of just going through and just typing through all of our thoughts.
Yep.
But an audio entry is just, I can just blab and just get it all out really quickly. Or I'm in a rush and I just want to capture what happened today, but I don't have time to sit down. And I have an Apple Watch and I'll just use that and I'll just hit record and blah 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 blah. 2 minutes and I've captured way more than I ever would. So that was a real game changer for me and probably just one of the best features.
Awesome.
I was waiting for somebody to do that, and you guys did it.
Well, and it's only getting better. I know we just introduced new file types for audio too, so I think that's expanded. You can add MP3s, waves, etc. to Day One. So if you have that, or files like that, you can import those now, which is really rad.
Oh yeah.
So, and I know that was a big thing. We had some, musicians would contact us and ask us about that because they'd like to record their songs and then put it in Day One. I was reminded today of an On This Day thing that popped up that was it a year ago or two, that we went and saw Ben Folds in concert with our local symphony orchestra, and I had a little audio snippet because we went into this little Q&A session with him, and so I've got that on audio in a recording, and it's so cool to just go back and be able to listen to that. So not the show he did, like I said, it was a Q&A, and we were told it was okay that I could record that. So I'm not breaking any laws out there, FCC, copyright people. But yeah, audio is awesome. It's great. Do you use transcription at all, or do you just kind of let it go in audio?
Oh no, I have too much to say
Okay.
for the
5 minutes is too
transcription. So
short.
I started off with it, and then I abandoned it. It says no, I need to set the setting so I can get as much audio in there as I can. I stuck with that, and that's been really nice. I mean, I really get back to the fact that you have so many tools and features and ways to customize it, that's really what makes it great. Even dating things, which is kind of a staple in journaling, right? Became an obstacle for me at one point. So I created a new journal because I just had a lot of memories that I wanted to capture, and they weren't associated with any date. So it's kind of like, where do I put these? How do I do this? So I just created another journal. It was just memories, and it's independent of date. I'm just putting down like my first this, or my memory of our first house, or my first pet, or things that don't have a date. And I just wasn't recording that stuff. No problem. I can just customize the app and do the things that I need to. And now I just have a journal that's independent of date, that's just categorized more by theme, by a topic, and I do that. So
I think you just named all the answers to your security questions, so you better be careful with that journal. Just kidding.
Never tell anyone my dog's name.
Exactly. Well, I know. Anyway, no, I'll stay away from that. Anyway, anything else you want to say before we sign off here?
Oh, yeah, there is one thing I want to say. I can only speak for myself, but I'm sure there are people listening that feel the same way. I just want to say thank you for the podcast. We interact with apps all the time, and sometimes they come and go, and or they get replaced or something. But with the podcast and what you do through support, feels a lot more like a community.
Yeah.
And we all live with the fear that the app we love is going to disappear. And every time I hear your voice, each episode that comes out, it just reminds me that you guys are there. You care about this stuff. You care about the community. You care about journaling, not just in the app itself, although they kind of go together. And that just instills a lot of comfort in me, and it just makes me want to just stay part of this community and just keep going. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you, Mike. What drew me to this company was that as well, because I joined in 2016, so it's been 4 years this month, but Day One had been around since 2011, and it was born out of Paul's desire to have a digital journal app that he liked, and he had some design background, and he knew some engineer friends, and they built this app, and it just kept getting better. I remember when my wife downloaded Classic, I think around the same time, either 2013, 2014, and then 2.0 had launched in 2016, and that's right before I started there. So that's where I kind of jumped in, and I was gung-ho. I loved the mission. I loved the desire to make the best journaling app, and just where we're going. We do get questions about adding tons of feature and being careful about feature bloat, and that makes total sense to us. That is not what we want to be. We want to do things that are going to enhance your journaling experience. Like the document scanning. That is so awesome for me, because now, like I said, I don't have to transcribe everything and type those things out. I guess I could audio record them and just read them to myself. I don't know if I want to listen to that, but taking, just scanning it, and it fits it to the page exactly, and then it's in my journal as a PDF. So I know, and I hope people recognize that's really what we're trying to do, is give you features that enhance your journaling experience and make it that personal, private journal, with the export options, obviously, for book printing and PDF if you want to share that or give it down to posterity. Like, that all makes sense to us, but that's the goal, and we wouldn't be here without our users. So right back at you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks again for joining us today. I'm going to try and keep this up a little more regularly. Schedules obviously are hectic, but we'll keep going. Stay tuned for more updates. There's more stuff coming to 4.12, and I don't know when 5.0 is coming, but I'm excited for that one. That's a big one, right?
Hmm.
Day 1 5.0. I'm excited. As always, if you need assistance, you can go to our help guides online, help.dayoneapp.com. There's a link below in the description, or you can contact support, and there's a few ways to do that as well. Right inside the iOS and Android app, if you go to the settings and support section, there's a little chat you can hit us up on, or email support@dayoneapp.com. It's been great. Thanks again, Mike, for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Stay safe and keep in touch, my friend.